The evening had already settled when Linden stepped into the ground floor studio. Rain moved in a steady murmur across the low skylight, a soft continuous sound that filled the quiet room without urgency. Cool air drifted through the half-open door, carrying the faint clean scent of wet pavement and damp leaves from the path outside. The space held the familiar smell of dry clay and wood, settled and still. Linden reached for the single lamp above the broad wooden table and switched it on. Warm light spread outward in a pale circle across the grain, leaving the farther corners of the studio in gentle shadow. The table's surface felt smooth under the first touch of fingers, cool from the hours since afternoon. Linden stood for a moment in that circle of light, letting the rain and the quiet gather around the room. Along the edges of the bench lay the week's pale dried clay scraps, thin and light, some curled at their margins where they had dried too quickly. A few more rested on the lower shelf, chalky and muted in color. Linden gathered them slowly, one piece and then another, the dry surfaces whispering faintly against each other as they collected in open palms. Each scrap felt light and brittle, the texture of old dust and once wet earth now firm. From a nearby shelf, Linden took a shallow pan, its metal cool to the touch, and set it in the center of the pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table. A little cool water was poured in, enough to pool shallowly across the bottom. The scraps were laid into the pan with care, edge beside edge, some overlapping gently. At once the water began its quiet work. The outer rims of the scraps darkened by slow degrees, the pale dryness giving way to a deeper, softer tone where the moisture touched. Rain continued its steady sound on the skylight overhead. The evening air from the half-open door moved lightly across the back of Linden's hands and wrists, a cool drift that carried no hurry. Linden remained standing beside the table, watching the pan. The scraps that had been thinnest darkened first, their edges growing pliant in appearance even before any pressure was applied. Deeper in the small pile, one firmer dry rim held its paler color longer, resisting the water's first reach. Linden wondered, without haste, how long that last firm edge would take to soften under patient pressure. There was no need to measure the time. The lamp hummed almost too softly to hear. The rain kept its even murmur. The clay would take what it needed. After a while, Linden rested both palms lightly on the table edge, fingers spread against the smooth wood just beyond the reach of the pan. The pale circle of warm lamp light held steady on the broad wooden table. Linden watched the water and the slowly darkening scraps, content to wait. The rain on the low skylight began to change its voice. What had been one long even murmur loosened into separate drops that landed with soft spaced taps, each one distinct and unhurried. Cooler air drifted a little more freely through the half-open door and brushed the backs of Linden's wrists where they rested on the table edge. In the shallow pan, the clay had taken on a deeper, even gray. The thin scraps had already gone soft and dark. The last firm rim had darkened as well and yielded under the lightest press of a fingertip, no longer holding its pale edge against the water. Linden waited a little longer, simply watching the surface glisten under the lamp, then slid both hands beneath the mass and lifted it free. A thin trail of cool water ran back into the pan and left a brief shine on the wood. The clay came up heavy and cool, still marked by the shapes of the old scraps yet willing now to join. Linden carried it the short distance to the wedging board and set it down in the pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table. Both palms settled over it. The long gentle folding began, pressing forward, turning the mass a quarter turn, pressing again. Each fold released a faint earthy scent, damp and clean. The clay grew smoother under the repeated motion, the last small air pockets closing without resistance. Linden's shoulders stayed loose. There was no count of folds, only the steady rhythm of hands that knew the feel of readiness approaching. When the mass felt nearly even throughout, the hands paused of their own accord. Without any decision, a portion was drawn upward and settled on the board again. Thumbs found the center and pressed gently outward, opening a shallow hollow. The clay answered at once, rising into a simple low wall. Slow thumb strokes moved around the circle, thinning the first walls with calm, even pressure. The clay cooled the skin where it touched. Soft ridges formed and then smoothed away under the next pass. The pale circle of warm lamp light held steady across the work, catching the faint sheen of moisture on the clay and the quiet gleam along the wooden grain beyond it. A low bowl took shape without plan, its rim still thick and unfinished, its curve already settling into something open and restful. Linden's hands slowed and then rested lightly on either side of the form. The unfinished bowl sat open on the table. Outside, the rain had eased fully into quiet spaced drips on the skylight. Cooler air moved softly through the room. Linden stood still for a while, noticing both, content to let the work wait exactly as it was. After a little time, Linden's fingers returned to the clay. The thumbs found the inner wall again and began a second slow circuit, pressing outward with even care. The wall grew thinner by degrees. Cool, slick clay slid under the skin and grew silkier with every pass. Soft ridges rose and vanished. The unfinished rim turned slowly beneath the hands. A faint movement passed near the lamp. A small pale moth settled on the metal rim above the bulb, wings folded and still. It had come in on the cooler air and stayed for the gentle heat alone. It did not flutter. It simply rested there, a quiet pale shape against the darker metal. Linden noticed it without pause and kept working. The moth remained a gentle companion at the edge of sight. Steady thumbs continued around the circle. The clay answered with a smooth give. Moisture gathered lightly on the fingertips and made a faint sheen that caught in the pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table. Beyond the clay, the wood grain showed its quiet gleam. The outer wall received the same calm pressure. Linden's left hand supported while the right thinned. The rim began to level itself under the repeated touch. High spots eased down. Low spots rose to meet them. No hurry guided the motion. Each circuit simply followed the last. Outside, the spaced drips on the skylight grew nearer and slower, as if the last of the rain were gathering itself. A soft drip sounded, then a longer pause, then another. Cool air drifted in from the half-open door and brushed the back of Linden's wrists. The clay stayed cool against the palms. The moth adjusted one wing by the smallest degree and then was still again. Its presence asked nothing. Linden's breath stayed even. The bowl's walls thinned a little more. The curve settled lower and wider, open and restful, while the rim grew more even under the slow circling thumbs. A faint earthy scent rose from the damp clay. The lamp hummed almost too softly to hear. Linden worked the thickness down once more, feeling the silkiness increase, feeling the wall grow responsive and fine. The pale circle of warm lamp light held steady across the table and the turning form. After several more circuits, the hands slowed. One small unevenness remained along the inner wall, a slight firmness that had not yet yielded. Linden did not press it away. The thumbs simply rested. Damp hands came to stillness on either side of the bowl. The moth stayed quiet on the lamp rim. The uneven place waited unanswered in the clay, patient as the slower drips outside. Linden's thumbs found the place again without searching. It sat a little lower on the inner wall, a firm little lump no larger than a lentil, cooler and denser than the silk around it. The clay elsewhere had grown yielding and fine. This one spot held its own small resistance, quiet and stubborn under the lightest pressure. The hands did not force it. Linden lifted the bowl a short way from the center of the table and set it gently aside, still within the pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table. Fingers moved to the shallow water dish that waited nearby. They dipped and turned, gathering a thin film of cool moisture, then rose again glistening faintly. A few extra drops were carried back to the clay. Linden let them fall along the uneven place and rested both thumbs there once more, barely moving. The water darkened the lump at once. It began to take on the same soft sheen as the walls around it, though the density still pressed back a little against the skin. Slower circling began. The thumbs traveled in a tight, unhurried path around the firmness, working only at its edges first. Each pass gathered a whisper of softened clay and spread it outward. The moth on the lamp rim remained still. Rain continued its spaced, soft drips on the skylight, and evening air drifted cool through the half-open door. The grain of the wooden table pressed faintly through the palms whenever Linden braced for a longer circuit. That quiet texture of wood against damp skin felt steady and familiar. The lump lessened by degrees. Its outline blurred. What had been a distinct hardness grew rounder, then thinner, then began to join the surrounding mass as if it had always belonged there. Linden added one more drop of water and kept the same slow rhythm. The clay under the thumbs grew silkier again. Resistance faded into the same even thickness that held the rest of the bowl. The form stayed open and low, its rim still level, its curve calm. After a final gentle pass, the hands eased away. The lump had nearly yielded. Only the softest memory of it remained, already folding into the larger quiet of the clay. Linden rested both hands flat beside the bowl, palms open to the cool table. The lamp hummed low. Outside, the remaining drip fell soft and slow, and the studio held its gentle stillness. Linden's palms rested a moment longer on the cool wood. The last faint memory of the lump had settled into the bowl's even walls, and the form waited without urgency. Outside the half-open door, the drip continued its slow measure. The lamp hummed its low note above the table. The hands rose and returned to the clay. Fingers slid beneath the low rim and lifted the bowl a little, turning it once in the pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table. The surface gleamed softly where the thumbs had passed. Linden set it down again and pressed the base more firmly against the grain, feeling the wood receive the weight. A final fraction of openness remained. The thumbs moved inward along the inner curve, guiding rather than forcing. Clay shifted of its own slow will. It settled lower, wider, into a hollow that matched the exact memory held in the palms from countless quiet evenings. The shape arrived as if the reclaimed scraps had kept that gentle arc inside them all along, waiting only for this unhurried return. The hollow felt known. It fit the natural cup of the hands without adjustment. Linden breathed once and let the thumbs travel the wall in one last slow circle. Cool dampness met the skin. Any remaining firmness thinned and vanished beneath the steady pass, leaving only silk and even thickness. The rim stayed level. The outer slope rested calm. Under the pale circle of warm lamp light, the finished form simply was. No further thinning was needed. The bowl held its quiet curve, open and low, complete in the soft glow. Shadows along its edge stayed gentle. The scent of wet clay rose faintly, clean and familiar. Linden eased the hands away and sat back a little. The grain of the table pressed its quiet pattern into the damp palms once more. A small cloth waited nearby. The fingers took it up and wiped the bench in long, unhurried strokes, clearing the thin film of slurry and the few pale flecks that had gathered at the edges. The wood emerged smooth and cool again beneath the cloth. The bowl remained where it had come to rest, finished and still in the lamp's circle. Linden set the cloth aside. The studio held the soft drip from the skylight and the low hum of the light. Cool evening air drifted through the half-open door. Nothing more needed to be done. The quiet form stayed, and the room settled around it. Linden reached for a clean damp cloth and shook it once, soft and slow, until the folds hung loose and even. The fabric was cool against the fingers, still holding a little water from earlier. With both palms the cloth was lowered over the finished bowl, settling without weight, covering the quiet curve completely. The pale circle of warm lamplight on the broad wooden table held the covered form at its edge, a gentle mound of white cloth glowing faintly from within. The bowl was lifted a short distance and set nearer the base of the lamp, still inside that same circle. It rested there safely, reclaimed and whole, the cloth already beginning to keep the clay from drying too soon. Linden stood a moment longer and watched the light rest on the weave, then turned to the few tools that had waited at the far side of the table. A small sponge and 2 simple ribs were carried to the shallow pan of cool water. Each was rinsed in slow turns, slurry loosening and drifting away until the surfaces came clean again. The water grew faintly cloudy and then stilled. The tools were set upright to drip dry on a folded scrap of towel, their edges quiet and ready for another evening whenever it might come. No change was made to the half-open door. Evening air continued its slow drift, cool and faintly scented with rain and wet earth. The skylight above kept its soft spaced drips, each one landing without hurry and fading into the next. Linden wiped the palms once more on the dry corner of a cloth and felt the last coolness of clay leave the skin. The lamp switch was turned a careful fraction lower. The bright center softened at once into a gentler glow, the pale circle shrinking and dimming across the wooden table until only a quiet pool of warmth remained. Shadows lengthened and grew kind. The covered bowl stayed just within that last light, safe and still. Linden stepped back from the table and crossed the floor without sound. At the doorway the studio was left exactly as it had settled, tools clean, door open to the night air, lamp low, bowl wrapped and resting. The last soft drips of rain kept company with the quiet form. Everything that had been dry was useful once more. Nothing remained that asked for hands or thought. Outside the threshold the cooler dark of the hall received the tired body. Behind, the ground floor room held its dim light and its slow drip, complete and unhurried, already drifting toward the long rest of night. The studio rests in dim light and drip, everything useful again, and there is nothing left to do but sleep.